With Age of Empires 4 shining its blessed rays down upon us, me and many others are returning to the series after a very casual 15-year hiatus. And while I'm a massive fan of the series, my console-heavy childhood meant that my Age of Empires experiences have been limited to playing the classic Age of Empires 2 at my cousin's house, and a 10-year-old me straight up playing Age of Empires 3 on my mum's work laptop, which I played on my lap using the trackpad. Meaning Age of Empires 4 is the first time I've been able to play this series with a proper setup. So welcome to my Age of Empires 4 guide, taught by someone who hasn't played the series in 15 years, a trusted expert who currently boasts almost 11 hours in the game. And while this video is part guide, it's also part review, part me talking about my experience, and part horror omen warning anyone who watches this video that they only have 7 days left to live. RIP, sorry about killing you, but subscribe to the channel before you succumb to your new skeletal form. Let's go over the basic mechanics much as I did just a few days ago. I kicked off the tutorial and got used to the core mechanics again. There's settlers, which get you resources, which are needed to build units and buildings. For example, one settler costs 50 food, while the lumber mill costs 50 wood. Lumber mills, just like mines and mills, are places the settlers can put resources, so they spend less time walking and more time gathering. Hot tip number 1, you want to place these buildings right next to the resource they're gathering to maximize efficiency. These buildings can be upgraded to make work even more efficient for not just this specific building, but all buildings of its kind. So it's often good to upgrade these as soon as possible to give you the bonus for the longest possible time. For example, it's good to upgrade the lumber mill immediately after building your first one. There are also military buildings, which will create military units of their corresponding type. Barracks make melee units, archery ranges make ranged units, stables make cavalry, and siege workshops make siege units. Halfway through the tutorial, my friends, who I'll refer to as Max and Tom, were ready to play a game, so I restarted my Age of Empires career with them by my side against 3 intermediate AI. At the start of the game, I posed the question: should I expect to be better than this level AI? And they said yeah, which was both wrong and right. It was wrong in the sense that from pretty early on, the AI were persistently harassing me. I was going through the usual song and dance of making settlers and building up my empire, but I was making rookie mistakes, like I wasn't upgrading my buildings and I didn't build a military fast enough. This meant I was constantly on the back foot the whole time, as the AI kept sending in forces to attack me. Big shout out to Tom, as he did help, but the AI were too much. After repelling the first couple waves, they finally won, all but wiping me out of the match. Undeterred, however, I escaped with 11 settlers and built a new town center behind my friends' empires, starting anew. This can be a tempting surrender and restart, but in team game modes, if you are alive, you can bring these games back, and they are all the more satisfying when you do so. For me, this early destruction led to phase 2 of my first game, which was sort of nice as I had no pressure on me, and this meant I could really focus on the mechanics without needing to outpace the AI. During my reascent, I more actively looked at upgrades. Each unit has its own upgrade, which makes it stronger and can even unlock abilities. Upgrades are expensive, so picking a few units like one type of melee, ranged, cavalry, and siege, and building a bunch of those with lots of upgrades is a more effective way to use your resources than having multiple different units of the same type and spreading low-level upgrades across all of them, for the most part. When it comes to combat, Age of Empires has a rock, paper, scissors style of combat, where certain units are strong against one type and weak against another. Melee units are good against cavalry, which can rush down siege units, which outgun range units, which pick off melee units. There is more to it than this, but this is a good rule of thumb. This super effective versus not very effective combat style leads the military creation process to be focused around thinking about what the opposition has and trying to counter-pick. However, leaning too heavily on one unit type means you yourself can be countered. This doesn't mean that a balanced army with all 4 unit types is best, as you can wreck shop with 1 or 2 unit types. It means that you have to think about which units you're versing and try to either counter those or ensure you're not being countered, or just outgun them so hard it doesn't matter. While we talked a little bit about research on buildings and units, there are also dedicated buildings such as the blacksmith and the university, which provide bonuses through upgrades and are definitely worth investing in. With this said, check which upgrades actually apply to the type of game you're playing and choose those. Starting out, it can be tempting to just upgrade generically because you have the resources, you know you should be upgrading, but you might not know what to invest in, which is what I did. But take a little bit of time to see if it's actually worth it, as only some will be really necessary. For example, if you don't have siege units, you don't need the siege ability, or if you're not being attacked and are on the offensive, you don't have to worry about extra building health. During this extended downtime, I got a little bit of experience with traders and markets. Traders make gold, which is great, as if you don't have a gold mine, which is very likely to happen in the mid and late game, making traders will be your main way to make money. Hot tip number 9, placing your market right next to an ally's market can mean you both generate gold much faster than if they are far apart, as traders generate gold for each trip they make. So the closer they are, the more trips they do, and the more gold they make. However, I found that making a ton of resources, specifically wood and food, and selling those was really effective at making gold as well. If you do this though, don't flood the market because the price will drop to 10 gold per 100 units, and it can be better just to wait a couple minutes for the market to recover, then you can sell again at 30, 40, or 50 gold per 100 units. In this cursed game where I chilled behind my friends for most of it, I managed to level up to the Castle Age, Age 3, and Age 4, the Imperial Age, also the Last Age. Leveling up ages allows you to start to create new buildings and new units, while also giving you access to new upgrades. Progressing through the ages at a reasonable pace is critically important. If you get behind, it can be a death sentence. I often found myself getting behind because I just kept pumping out military units and settlers and was exhausting all of my resources in an attempt to stay on pace. This tactic is a trap, however. Take a breather, let your food and gold rise, then take the new age. The new age will lead to better upgrades and better resource acquisition to make up for the temporary slowdown, while also letting you get new units and abilities which can be crucial for growth. I know the conclusion of my first game is of vital interest to everyone, so I can let you know it had a happy ending. After basically losing my empire, I built some bombards and a bit of a military and managed to come through at the end of the game to clean up the victory. Was I a crucial member? No. Did they need me to win? Not really. But did I help? Yes. Yes, I did. And that's what Age of Empires is about. Either way, a legendary performance where I got more score than the AI, proving I was better than those intermediate plebeians. I should note we quickly moved the AI difficulty to hard from here on out. After a couple games, you might really start to look at the fact that there are different civilizations which do different things. For anyone who's played Civilization, EU4, Hearts of Iron, or any game with classes, then you're familiar with the concept. These different civilizations actually make a fairly big difference in how you play the game. When I played as the English, I had a lot of longbowmen because they have an extra powerful and special version of this unit, which is unique to only them. While my Abbasid game was basically all dudes on horses, I made a lot of cavalry and made sure even my archers had a horsey friend. While these differences can be overwhelming, they are important to recognize. If you try to play every game the same, then you will likely be massively underutilizing your chosen civilization and undermining your ability to succeed. So either pick a civilization that complements your natural playstyle, or try to play the way you think you are meant to with that empire. Even doing a poor job of playing that civilization style will likely end up with you having a better game than if you just did your default thing and played well generically. For example, there are relics and religion in the game, and I basically didn't engage with this at all as it was too much for me to handle early on. So when I played as the Holy Roman Empire, an empire focused around religion and relics, I really didn't get the most out of them because I wasn't good at using the main mechanic they are good at, and this was my worst game, even though outside of this I was playing really well. Now that religion has been mentioned, let's discuss it. There are a few things to be aware of. Firstly, religious buildings, which come online in the Third Age and produce religious units. These units can help heal your other units, so having a few in your army can help to keep your dudes fighting, although they will almost always die super fast as they beeline towards the front line. Religious units can also acquire these aforementioned relics, which are scattered across the map. This is the only one I captured in my first 7 games, and it's only because we were playing islands and it was ridiculously close to me, and yet the AI still managed to get there before me. These relics give you bonuses and gold and are stored in your religious buildings. building. Don't just ignore the relics like I did because it's a bit too much to handle. Try to at least capture the ones that will be very close to you, as the bonuses are really good. The game also has holy sites which are captured by religious units, and if you control all of them for 10 minutes, then you win, which I managed to do valiantly here. I mean, look at this pro setup. I mean, it's not as good as Max's pro setup, but I managed to get the highest score in this game, so who's the real winner, huh? Everyone. We were a team. The AI is actually pretty good at sending units towards you and consistently will put pressure on you for most of the game. They attack in well-constructed and organized armies, and they will lean into their civilization's bonuses and uniqueness to keep the upper hand. Hot tip 15, it can be good to create a barracks and get 10 or so spearmen earlier on to be ready for an early attack. If you don't, they will roll into your land and kill you. This is a mistake I made on 2 separate occasions and led to me being wiped both times. Conversely, doing raids where you mostly just focus killing settlers can be a great way to hurt them early on and can make them weaker for the entire game. This is especially effective if you team up with someone else to do it. To defend against bigger attacks, make sure you build walls. Building walls to the boundary of the map and just encasing a decent size of land and resources can be really good for the mid and late game, as if your walls are too tightly packed around your area, then your settlers will have to leave those areas to get resources later, leaving them very vulnerable. However, building too big can mean it's really tough to defend your perimeter and makes it easy to be broken into and forward settle, which is when the opponent constructs a new base forward, or specifically close to you. A mistake I also made, and this led me to watching as an outpost was destroyed before I could bring my army over to it. While I talked about this in regard to the AI, this advice also applies to players, mostly. The issue is that players are way more unpredictable and it's harder to give general advice. As most people could have assumed, the water maps are where the AI struggles the most, which is unsurprising because I can imagine programming good island map tactics is really hard. These struggles are seen in 2 main ways. One, naval combat, which is a little bit janky, but overall isn't too bad, but it's definitely a little bit more wild and wacky than land combat. On these maps, building up naval units and getting control of the water can be a great way to keep the opposition down, as it lets you prevent them from moving forward or exploring, and means you can get easy kills against their ships and any buildings close to the water. The other much more noticeable area where the AI struggles is the AI's kind of shoddy ability to coordinate attacks. When playing a 3v3 against hard AI on an island map, the AI basically just only attacked me constantly through the game and not my allies. Why? I don't know. You might think this is a major issue, but it was kind of okay to deal with because they just kept sending small groups of units to attack me, sometimes straight up 1 or 2 at a time, all of which I could easily repel. Their best attack was when they dropped 2 siege units and 2 melee units in my backline and took out a dock, before I just rolled over and wiped them out. Overall, I wasn't really sure why they were doing this, and they were a lot easier to deal with than when the AI is simply on land-only maps. So I did all of this during the technical stress test, as the game literally constantly reminded us with its bouncing technical stress test reminder on the screen at all times. And while you did sort of zone it out, there was no way to turn it off. Either way, I played only online games against either AI with my friends against other technical stress testers, or against each other. The vast majority of the time, the connection was great and there was only minimal lag. At worst, it would pause for a couple seconds before catching up, which is a great sign and certainly indicates that the game will be able to handle proper online games in the future. Playing with players versus playing with the AI has a different feel to it. Single player is great, but it's missing the crucial ability to coordinate with your team and actually work together, in that the AI will largely just do its own thing, and while it will sort of complement you, it's nowhere near as much as a human will. If you do play online, be aware that there are absolute demons online, like Purple, who fucking wrecked shop. I mean, check this dude's score compared to all of us. We got mauled, but that is the nature of the game. There's highly likely going to be a ranked matchmaking system in the full release, which will help lessen this, but expect to be wrecked by some aficionado who's been playing for 20 years if you step into an open lobby. So, is Age of Empires 4 good? I mean, yeah, it's amazing. The Age of Empires concept is a stone cold killer, and they've cleaned it up and produced another masterpiece of the real-time strategy genre. A masterpiece which you are now fully equipped to perfect after watching this inspirational guide, even if you, just like me, have been away from the game for well over 10 years. Thank you for watching the video, a true S-tier performance by you. If you do like the content, then leave it a like and subscribe to the channel. Also check out my other videos, there's definitely some saucy content that will pique your interest.